I used to believe that we had it all. The perfect marriage, the thriving business we built from the ground up, and now, our newborn son, a symbol of everything we had worked so hard to create. I would wake up every morning beside my husband, Adrian, feeling lucky, feeling safe. He was my partner, my best friend. But perfect illusions don't last forever. It started with something small. A feeling. An unshakable sensation in my gut that something was off. Adrian had always been busy with work, but lately, his late-night emails and sudden business meetings had become more frequent. The competitor we had been wary of, Sophia Grant, had been relentless in her tactics, stealing clients, undercutting our prices. Adrian and I often spoke about her in strategy meetings, debating ways to stay ahead of the game. And yet, something about his tone when he mentioned her changed. The frustration was still there, but there was something else beneath it, something I couldn't quite name. Then, one evening, Adrian fell asleep with his phone in his hand. I wasn't the type of wife to invade his privacy. I respected boundaries. But that night, as I gently pulled the phone from his fingers to set it on the nightstand, the screen lit up with a message. It was from Sophia. "Miss you already. Can't wait to see you again." My breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled as I stared at the message. 1,000 thoughts collided in my mind, excuses, rationalizations. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she was talking about a business meeting. Maybe. The notification disappeared, and instinct took over. My fingers, as if acting on their own, unlocked his phone. I shouldn't have been able to, but muscle memory guided me. His passcode hadn't changed. And there it was. A flood of messages, hidden beneath a thread labeled with a simple letter, S. Last night was incredible. Wish we didn't have to sneak around. Let's get away soon. Just the two of us. A storm raged in my chest, my heart pounding so violently I could feel it in my ears. I scrolled further, reading line after line of betrayal. Dinners. Hotels. Secrets whispered between them in the dead of night. A sharp pain stabbed through my ribs, like I had been physically struck. Adrian had been lying to me. Not just about work, not just about late meetings. He had been lying about us. I looked over at him, sleeping peacefully beside me. The man who swore vows to me, the man who had held my hand as I gave birth to our son just months ago. The man I thought I knew. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to break, not yet. I had to know everything. I had to know just how deep the betrayal went. I sat in the dim glow of the bedside lamp, my fingers trembling as they hovered over the screen. My mind screamed at me to stop, to put the phone down, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But I couldn't. I wasn't just a wife now. I was a mother. I had to know the truth. My stomach twisted into knots as I scrolled further. Sophia, did you tell her yet? Adrian, not yet. Timing has to be right. Sophia, you keep saying that, but I don't want to be your secret forever. Adrian, I know, baby. Just trust me. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. Tell me? Tell me what? That he was leaving? That he was going to rip our family apart? Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to read on. Adrian, things are complicated right now. The business, the baby. I have to be careful. Sophia, I don't care about the business. I care about us. Adrian, I care about you too. You know that. A strangled sound escaped me, something between a sob and a gasp. I pressed a hand to my mouth, my body trembling as I processed the weight of those words. He cared about her. I wanted to scream. Instead, I forced myself to breathe, to stay silent. I could feel the heat of my rage bubbling beneath my skin, a wildfire ready to consume me whole. But I wouldn't let it. Not yet. I needed more. I needed undeniable proof. Fingers shaking, I opened his email. And there it was. A hotel reservation under his name, 2 nights at an expensive boutique hotel. The dates? Just last week. A flight confirmation to Los Angeles. A city neither of us had any business in. A receipt for a diamond bracelet. Not for me. I had never received one. My breath hitched. I felt sick. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a second life, one he had carefully built behind my back. I looked at him, his face relaxed, oblivious in sleep. How could he do this? How could he share a bed with me, kiss me, tell me he loved me, while whispering the same words to someone else? I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. This wasn't over. I wouldn't let him take everything from me. Sleep never came that night. I lay in bed beside my husband, my body frozen in place as my mind raced. Every soft breath he took felt like a dagger to my chest. How long had this been going on? How many times had he left our home, kissed my forehead, told me he loved me, and then gone straight to her? My throat burned from holding back sobs, but I wouldn't cry. Not yet. As dawn began creeping through the curtains, Adrian stirred. He stretched, his arm grazing mine, and for the first time in our marriage, I recoiled. He didn't seem to notice. "Morning," he mumbled, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He turned to me with a lazy smile, pressing a kiss to my temple. The touch made my skin crawl. I forced a weak smile. "Morning." I felt like a stranger in my own body, forcing normalcy when all I wanted to do was scream at him. But I needed time. I needed a plan. Adrian swung his legs over the bed and reached for his phone. My heart slammed against my ribs as I realized what I had done, left his messages open. But before he could unlock the screen, the baby monitor crackled to life. Our son's soft whimper filled the room. Guess that's my cue. I hurried out of bed before Adrian could see the panic in my eyes, rushing to the nursery. I scooped up my baby boy, holding him tightly against my chest. His small body was warm, his tiny fingers curling against my skin. He was the only real thing in my life now. I closed my eyes, inhaling his baby scent, willing my heart to slow. I couldn't let Adrian see my pain. Not yet. Digging deeper. For the next few days, I played the part. I smiled when I needed to. Laughed when it was expected. I kissed Adrian goodbye as he left for meetings, and pretended I wasn't picturing him tangled in her sheets. But behind closed doors, I was unraveling the truth. I started small, watching him more closely, noticing the way he always kept his phone face down, how he took calls in the other room, how he was suddenly so protective of his laptop. Then, when he fell asleep one night, I made my move. I grabbed his phone and went straight to his email. I needed to know everything. And what I found shattered me. Flight confirmations. Hotel bookings. A lease application. I blinked. My stomach twisted painfully as I read the words over and over again. He was renting an apartment. Not just any apartment. A luxury penthouse. And her name was on the lease. I stumbled back, gripping the dresser to steady myself. Adrian wasn't just having an affair. He was building a new life. One where I no longer existed. I felt like I was drowning. I had to confront him. But not yet. I needed him to think I was still in the dark. I needed to destroy him before he destroyed me. I thought I knew betrayal. I thought nothing could hurt worse than those messages, than seeing her name tied to a lease with my husband. I was wrong. Because nothing compared to the pain of pretending. Of sitting across from him at breakfast, watching him sip his coffee like our world wasn't crumbling beneath us. Of hearing him hum to our son, acting like he was a devoted father when I knew he was planning to leave us. But I didn't say a word. I waited. I watched him carefully, how he flinched when his phone buzzed, how he suddenly had extra work to do at the office, how he'd stare off into space when he thought I wasn't looking. He was nervous. Good. He should be. The first crack. It happened 3 nights later. Adrian had just stepped out of the shower, a towel wrapped around his waist, when his phone, charging on his nightstand, lit up. "Sophia, I need you tonight. Please." He froze. I saw it, the panic. The way his entire body tensed, his fingers twitching like he wanted to snatch the phone up before I could see. He turned to me slowly, forcing a casual smile. "Work stuff," he lied. Lied. Right to my face. I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "At this hour?" He hesitated. "It's, the new client. Just some last-minute questions about the deal we closed." The deal. Our company's biggest competitor had tried to steal one of our largest clients last month. Sophia's company. I felt something inside me snap. I had spent weeks drowning in this betrayal, suffocating under the weight of it. But at that moment, as Adrian stood there, still wet from the shower, looking me in the eye while feeding me another lie, I felt nothing but cold, calculated rage. I forced a smile. "Oh. Of course." His shoulders loosened, relief washing over his face. He had no idea I knew. And that was his biggest mistake. A plan in motion. That night, I sent my first message. Not to him. To Sophia. From an anonymous number. "Are you ready to destroy a family? Because it's about to get messy." I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. Because while Adrian was out with her, lying to my face, covering his tracks, I was preparing for war. I barely slept that night. Not because of pain. Not because of heartbreak. Because I had made a choice. I wasn't going to sit in the dark and let my husband, the father of my child, throw me away like I was nothing. I wasn't going to let her take what I had spent years building. If Adrian wanted to play dirty, so be it. I'd burn everything down before I let them win. The trap. The next morning, I acted normal. I made coffee. Kissed our son's forehead. Let Adrian's lips brush against my cheek before he left for the day, probably straight into her arms. And then I got to work. Step 1, gather every piece of evidence. I spent hours combing through his emails, downloading bank statements, taking screenshots of hotel reservations, texts, flight itineraries. Every lie. Every betrayal. Step 2, secure myself financially. The business was in both of our names, but I had handled most of the paperwork. I knew where everything was. I checked accounts, assets, insurance policies. If Adrian thought he could walk away and leave me and our son with nothing, he was about to get a rude awakening. Step 3, make him sweat. That evening, as we sat across from each other at dinner, I slid my fingers along the rim of my wine glass and tilted my head. "I ran into someone today," I said casually. Adrian barely looked up from his plate. "Oh? Who?" "Sophia." The fork slipped from his fingers, clattering against the plate. Bullseye. I watched his throat bob as he swallowed. "Oh, yeah." She seemed nervous, I continued, swirling my wine. Like she knew something I didn't. His face paled. "She told me something interesting," I added, lying through my teeth. "Something about you." Adrian's jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. What did she say?" I let the silence stretch. Let him squirm. Let him panic. Finally, I smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, don't worry. I already know everything." And then I got up, kissed our son goodnight, and left him sitting there, trapped in his own web of lies. The beginning of the end. That night, I heard him pacing. He barely slept. Good. Because the game had just begun. Adrian was unraveling. I saw it in the way his hands fidgeted at breakfast, the way he checked his phone every few minutes, the way he watched me, studying my every move, as if trying to figure out just how much I knew. Good. Let him wonder. Let him suffer. I didn't give him any answers. Instead, I carried on as if nothing had changed. I kissed our son. I played the role of the devoted wife. I made him question his reality. And then, I waited. Because men like Adrian, they always make mistakes. The slip up. It happened 2 days later. I was folding laundry in the bedroom when his phone buzzed on the nightstand. He was in the shower. It wasn't locked. Sophia, why haven't you answered me? Did you tell her? Adrian, I swear if you don't fix this, I will. My stomach twisted, but I didn't hesitate. I opened the messages. There were hundreds. Most were the same desperate questions. Panicked. Clinging. But one message buried in the thread, shattered the last piece of my restraint. Sophia, I don't care if she just had a baby. I've waited long enough. I want you to leave her, now. The world blurred. I don't care if she just had a baby. She knew about our son. She knew about our family. And she didn't care. My body shook as I read it again and again, a rage unlike anything I had ever felt rising inside me. They deserved each other. And I was going to make sure they both lost everything. Lighting the fire. That night, as Adrian sat on the couch, his phone gripped tightly in his hands, I leaned against the doorway. Who were you texting? I asked sweetly. He jumped. Actually jumped. No one, he said too quickly, locking the screen. Work stuff. I stepped forward, eyes locked on his. Is that right? He swallowed. Because I had an interesting conversation today, I continued, my voice soft, dangerous. Adrian's knuckles went white around his phone. With who? I smiled. Your mistress. His face drained of all color. Checkmate. Adrian's entire body tensed. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His lips parted again, searching for a response, but nothing came. For the first time since this all began, he was speechless. I let the silence stretch. Let the weight of my words settle. Then I smiled. Nothing to say? He blinked rapidly, his mind scrambling. I don't know what you're talking about. I laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, Adrian. I shook my head, stepping closer. Do you really think I'm that stupid? His Adam's apple bobbed. I pulled out my phone and, with one tap, showed him the messages. Every single lie. Every secret. Every betrayal. His own words staring back at him. He paled. Where did you get that? That's what you're worried about? I scoffed. Not the fact that you've been cheating on me? That you were planning to leave your wife and child for her? Adrian ran a hand down his face, exhaling shakily. It's not what you think. Not what I think. My fingers clenched around my phone, but I refused to let him see me break. Then tell me, Adrian. What exactly is it? His jaw tensed. I was going to tell you. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. Oh. When? Before or after you moved into your shiny new apartment with Sophia? His eyes snapped to mine, filled with pure, naked fear. He knew. He knew I had seen everything. I took a slow step forward, lowering my voice to a whisper. I know about the penthouse. The flights. The gifts. My smile didn't reach my eyes. I know about all of it. Adrian staggered back like I had physically struck him. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I cut him off. My voice was calm, steady. Deadly. You weren't going to tell me, Adrian. You were going to blindside me. Walk away from our family, from our business, without a second thought. He was shaking his head now, gripping his hair like he could physically undo what had been done. I was going to fix this, he whispered, I laughed again, the sound hollow. Fix this? I gestured around the room. There is no fixing this, Adrian. You made your choice. His eyes, filled with something desperate, locked onto mine. We have a son. I stiffened. How dare he? How convenient, I hissed, stepping forward. Now he matters to you? My voice trembled, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from rage. You didn't think about him when you were sneaking around. When you were lying to me. When you were building a life with her. His lips parted, but I didn't let him speak. You don't get to use him to save yourself, I whispered. Adrian looked utterly wrecked. Good. Because this was just the beginning. Adrian sank onto the couch, his hands buried in his hair. He looked like a man on the verge of breaking. But I felt nothing. I had spent too many nights drowning in his betrayal. Now, it was his turn to suffer. Say something, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I tilted my head. What exactly do you want me to say? He exhaled shakily. That you'll give me a chance to explain. That we can fix this. I laughed. A bitter, hollow sound. Fix this? Fix what, Adrian? The marriage you destroyed? The family you threw away for Sophia? He winced at her name. You don't get to play the victim, I continued, my voice razor sharp. You had a choice. And you didn't choose me. You didn't choose our son. His eyes snapped to mine. That's not true. Isn't it? I scoffed. You weren't just having an affair, Adrian. You were planning an escape. A whole new life. I stepped closer, my voice trembling with rage. Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you just going to walk out one day and never come back? He opened his mouth. Closed it. That silence told me everything. I nodded slowly, the last pieces of my heart crumbling to dust. You were, I whispered. Adrian reached for me. Please, I jerked away. Don't touch me. He flinched. I never wanted to hurt you. My laughter was sharp. And yet, you did. The weight of his betrayal settled between us, heavy and suffocating. There was no turning back now. Adrian's eyes searched mine, his voice breaking. What happens now? I took a slow breath, steadying myself. Because I knew exactly what happened next. You're going to pack a bag, I said, my voice eerily calm. And you're going to leave. His face fell. You don't mean that. I held his gaze, unflinching. I do. For the first time, I saw true fear in his eyes. He knew he had lost me. And this was just the beginning of his downfall. Adrian didn't move. He just sat there, staring at me like he couldn't believe this was happening. Like he expected me to break down, to give him another chance. Like he still thought he had control. But he didn't. Not anymore. You're serious, he finally whispered. I crossed my arms. Dead serious. He let out a humorless laugh, shaking his head. Where am I supposed to go? I raised a brow. I'm sure Sophia will happily take you in. His jaw clenched. You think I'm going to run straight to her? That's exactly what you were planning, wasn't it? I shot back. Adrian inhaled sharply, rubbing his face with both hands. Stop. I held up a hand. Don't waste your breath lying to me. I know everything. His silence was deafening. I turned and walked away. Not just from him. From us. From the years I spent believing in a man who didn't deserve me. I went to our bedroom, grabbed an empty duffel bag, and threw it at his feet. Start packing. Adrian's face crumpled. Please, can we just? No. His throat bobbed. What about the business? I felt a sharp pang in my chest, but I refused to let it show. Don't worry about it. I'll handle everything. His eyes widened. You can't. I already did. His breath hitched. What does that mean? It means while you were busy sneaking around with her, I was preparing, I said coolly. I met with a lawyer. I gathered every document, every financial statement. I know exactly what I'm entitled to. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. And I'm taking it all, Adrian. His face drained of color. I built this business with you, he whispered. And I'll run it without you, I shot back. A long silence stretched between us. I had never seen Adrian look so lost. For the first time, he was realizing something. I wasn't just kicking him out. I was erasing him. You're not the man I married, I said softly. And I refuse to let my son grow up watching me tolerate a betrayal like this. His lips parted, but no words came. I turned to leave the room. Be gone by morning. The end of us. I didn't sleep that night. I listened as Adrian packed, as drawers opened and closed, as zippers dragged across suitcases. At one point, I heard him crying. It didn't move me. Not after all the nights I had cried alone, trying to figure out what I did wrong. By sunrise, he was gone. A note sat on the kitchen counter. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I stared at it for a long moment, then ripped it in half. Sorry wasn't enough. Sorry wouldn't undo what he had done. But I didn't need his remorse. Because I was free. And that was worth everything. The house felt different after Adrian left. Quieter. Lighter. For so long, I had lived under the weight of his lies, suffocating beneath the illusion of a perfect marriage. But now, standing in the middle of our home, the home I refused to lose, I realized something. I wasn't broken. I was free. The aftermath. Adrian tried. He called. He texted. He begged for a conversation. I ignored him. Instead, I focused on what mattered, my son, my business, my future. I met with my lawyer, ensuring that every loose end was tied, that Adrian would have no control over my life moving forward. The business? Mine. The house? Mine. Our son? Protected. Adrian got what he deserved, a life without me. And as for Sophia? It didn't take long for their perfect fantasy to crack. Without the thrill of secrecy, without the power trip of sneaking around, the truth settled in. She hadn't won a prize, she had inherited a liar. I heard through mutual connections that their relationship didn't last long. Not that I cared. Because I was too busy rebuilding a life far better than the one he left behind. The final goodbye. Months later, I saw him again. We met in a lawyer's office to finalize everything. He looked different, hollow. Like a man who had finally realized he had lost everything. He tried to talk to me afterward. I never stopped loving you, he whispered. I met his gaze without hesitation. Calm. Strong. Untouchable. I stopped loving you the moment you made me an option. Then I walked away, leaving him behind for good. He was my past. And I was just getting started.